Well, good morning, friends. It's good to be with you again. The weeks keep seeming to fly by, even though they seem to be longer and longer every week. It just seems like they're still coming quickly. So it's so good to be with you for another episode of Coffee with Caregivers, and again, another excellent show today. I think we're going to have a repeat guest. And I think once you see who it is, you'll be very happy that he's back on a different speaking on a different topic. Um, so I've got a quote this morning, and it says, "Being told you're appreciated is one of the simplest and most uplifting things you can hear." Now we know that, right? Because we feel good when somebody appreciates us and they tell us that they appreciate us, either in general or maybe even for a specific thing, a specific reason. So kind of think about how that makes you feel as an adult, where you are in your life, and then let's remember that as we go out and interact with other adults, and certainly with the kids within our scope, in our realm. um, we all need to know we're appreciated so we can feel appreciated. Appreciated people then appreciate others. So let's pass that on. That's an act of kindness that we can all do. It's very easy, and we can do it, right? Okay. So got another cup today. This one has starfish on it, and I'm not going to tell you the story of the starfish because I'm sure you've all heard it. And, you can't maybe make a difference to hundreds and hundreds or thousands laying on the beach, but to those one or two or three or however many you can throw back in the water, you made a difference. You gave them life. So this is an important cup. And on the inside, it says bet on a shore thing. So the SHORE, bet on a shore thing. I love the beach, although I sunburn like you wouldn't believe. So that's not a good thing for me. But I love the beach and I love the ocean. And I love to hear the sound of the waves. Um, just really nothing more relaxing for me than that. So that's my getaway whenever I can figure out how to make that happen and get to the water, which isn't nearly often enough. But good morning to you. All right, let's go right into our guest because, like I said, Jeff Luce is returning for an encore, so to speak. If you watched our August 25th episode, you learned about a little bit about Jeff and certainly a lot about PTSD. And that was much appreciated, Jeff. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that episode with us. But today, we've got a new topic. It's about ACEs and COVID. Um, so before we get into that, again, we'd like for you to introduce yourself and then tell us about your cup.
Yes, absolutely. Irene, thank you so much for having me back. It is a real honor to be back with you. It's always fun, and especially when we get to talk about things that we care deeply about and are exciting to talk about. So, yeah, I'm Jeff Luce. I live in the Metro Atlanta area, North Atlanta, actually. I'm a mental health clinician, master's level licensed professional counselor. Have worked a lot in the foster care space and system, worked in a lot of group homes and with a lot of foster families in the Atlanta area kind of early in my career. Did some other things in the behavioral health, mental health, like leadership space. Met Irene doing some consulting work. That's where we go back to again. I mentioned that last time I was here. And then again, now I'm in the insurance or managed care space, and I'm at Optum, which is a subsidiary of United Health, and I get to lead our foster care charge. So anything and everything foster care, I get to have my hands in, and it's just such an honor to be in that role and to kind of be thinking on a day in and day out basis, what does it look like to serve kids in foster care well? And support families and all of that. So yeah, that's me. This is my mug, Irene, I brought. So if you look at it, a couple of things. It's kind of a brown mug. It's got, this is like the cool part, right? It's kind of looks like
Yes.
kind of looks like brass knuckles now that I look
Yeah.
at it. It's not a brass knuckles thing. It's just kind of two fingers. It's got this old car and kind of like a model showing off this, I don't know if you can see it, old fancy car. And it says Franklin. I don't know anything about the car. I don't know anything about anything other than this mug was my grandfather's mug. And he passed
Oh,
away 20 years ago. And, I'm not a real like object sentimental thing. So I don't have like a ton of stuff, but I keep this mug in my office as a reminder of my grandfather. He was a wonderful man. He, kind of came up from not much, served in World War II, as a medic, became a doctor, and then kind of served as a small town kind of country doctor his whole life and whole career, and just was a really cool guy, just a really neat guy. And again, passed away about 20 years ago. And our family misses him, but he left such a great legacy, and so I get to drink from his mug. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah, I've got a teapot from one of my grandmas. She loved her hot tea, and of course the other grandma just didn't like that at all. But this grandma, I was actually raised on their farm. My dad and mom built a little house on the farm and hog farm. So I lived my whole life there until I went off to college,
wow,
um,
wow,
so I got to thoroughly enjoy my grandparents every day. They're my dad's parents, but the treasures that we keep and the memories that we have are so wonderful. And so I remember
absolutely.
having my tea with my grandma. The other thing that I remember so much is we both loved Gunsmoke. This is way back in the day. And so I'd go to grandma and grandpa's house and we'd sit on the grandma and I'd sit on the couch and we'd watch Gunsmoke and she'd say, "Oh, I love Chester." And I say, "I love Marshall Dillon." And so we were in love with those two guys, and that was our thing. And up until she passed away, that was our shared moments that were special to us, is because that was just her and me watching Gunsmoke and being in love with these two actors, right? Um, and and what wonderful, wonderful memories and bonding that was. And for a grandma who was an outside lady and loved every animal God created and had every kind of critter in a cage or whatever, and they loved her. And it was a different way of life that we lived back then. And um, we have so many good memories. So I'm so glad you have something like that too,
Yes,
to bring
absolutely.
back, what was really important, and the kind of the structure of our lives that made us who we are today is those experiences for
Absolutely.
sure. And so I always am concerned about kids in care who have so many disjointed
Yep.
experiences, and that they don't have that kind of strength and
Yep.
structure, maybe, or whatever we want to call it, to bring forward, to use, and to draw from when they become adults. So,
Absolutely.
um, yay for you. And I love the cup. I love the handle.
It is
If somebody
cool.
needs
It
to
is
do that
cool.
again, that really is. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
very awesome. Okay, so when we talked, I had read an article about ACEs and the effects that the pandemic is or may be having on children in particular. That's adding to the checks on the ACEs list. And so I ask you if you would be able to maybe talk to us a little bit about ACEs in general,
Yeah.
what it is, what it means, how do we figure it out, and then anything you might have gleaned about how the stresses and the traumas of the pandemic and just kind of how the world is working right now may be adding to that checklist for from the kids that we currently have in care or that may be entering care. So it's another new wrinkle to some of those kids that we may experience new things with them. Um,
Absolutely.
so I am so excited that you accepted the challenge to do that, and you can just tell us what you have to say.
Yeah. Oh, great. No, it's a really I would say it's like an important topic, and it's also a very interesting topic. I want to give a little bit of the history of this. So ACEs, right? It's like, not to be funny, but it's like it's something that sounds cool, but it's not cool, right? Right, right. It ACEs. It
It's
stands
not a
for
game of poker,
adverse.
that's for sure.
It's not ace in the hole. It's not that. Okay. Um, it stands for adverse childhood experiences. So ACE, adverse childhood experience, and then the S is the plural, right? ACEs.
Right.
Um, the history of ACEs is interesting. It kind of has its roots in the 80s. And in California, Kaiser, the kind of health system, Kaiser, had an obesity clinic. And they were having phenomenal success in this obesity clinic with, weight loss and health and kind of across the board success. But they were having about a 50% dropout rate, right? And so half the people were just dropping out at some point in the program, despite the success they were having. And so, being interested, clinical people and scientists, and again, they're health people focused on obesity in adults, and that's what they were doing. But kind of being interested in the why around that, they tracked down and ran down the dropout cohort, the people that had dropped out, and did an interview with the people who had dropped out. And something that emerged from their studies and from their interviews and what they were finding is a vast majority of those folks who had dropped out had experienced childhood sexual abuse, which is interesting. And so that kind of led them down this road of, kind of curiosity and pulling these things together. And so fast forward maybe a decade, and in 1995, Kaiser, along with some partnership with the CDC, developed a protocol around ACEs, and again, adverse childhood experiences, and basically through a lot of rigor and study and work, honed in on 10 adverse childhood experiences that they would kind of look at and measure, and they kind of did all the protocol development and got the kind of study ready. And then actually they were able to, from their health system, recruit over 17,000 volunteers to do the study, to do the survey, and then to understand some of the outflows of that. And so the study or the survey gets into 10 domains. So there's 10 ACEs, right, in this kind of space: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, domestic violence, household substance use, so use of substances, illicit substances in the home, household mental illness, so someone in the home with mental illness, parental separation or divorce is one of them, and then having an incarcerated family member. And so the idea was, it's kind of a binary or yes or no. Like, do you have this as part of your childhood experience? Yes or no. And if yes, you kind of get a point in essence for that, right? It's a super interesting study, and it's amazing kind of the scope and the amount of information they were able to gather. And there's been a million other kind of like studies that have flowed out of it and all that, but that's kind of the backstory. The early findings and the findings that have been replicated or repeated like over the course of time are, of the respondents, 28% of the respondents reported kind of a check yes for the physical abuse domain, right? So they said yes. 21% said yes for the sexual abuse domain. There were 40% of the people that responded had 2 or more. And then 12.5% of those who responded had 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences. And being a, coming from a kind of comprehensive health framework and model, Kaiser and the CDC and all of that, one of the things they were trying to understand is what are the long-term and way downstream impact or correlations or connections between these ACEs, between these adverse childhood experiences and long-term health consequences. And so kind of at a high level, what they found is the number of ACEs, right? The number of check marks that you have correlate very highly and strongly with smoking, with drug and alcohol use, with sexual acting out, with severe obesity, with depression, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, and ultimately a shortened lifespan. So that's kind of the big one, right? Like you have these ACEs, there's a limiting of the lifespan that goes on. So when they were comparing the 4+ category, right? The people who had 4 or more ACEs
Right.
against the category that had 0, didn't
Right.
have any of the ACEs. There was a 7-fold increase in alcoholism, meaning that you would be 700% more likely to have a problem with alcohol, to the level of alcoholism, if you had 4 or more of these versus if you had 0. Interestingly, you had a twice as likely cancer diagnosis, probably related to some of these health things. You had a 4 times more likely prevalence of emphysema. And then one of the studies they did around suicide and the ACEs data, which was just, it almost blows my mind when I write it down and think about it. If you had 6 or more ACEs, you are literally 3,000% or 30 times more likely to have attempted suicide than someone with 0. I mean, this is unreal, right? So that's kind of the structure, the background, the backstory of ACEs. So let me start there. I mean, I don't know if there's any kind of comments or thoughts or questions you have just on the kind of framework there.
No, but thank you for that overview. I was aware that Kaiser was part of the instigator, I guess is the right, to get this done, but I didn't know how they got there. So that was really very interesting. And that, even for people having a lot of success losing weight, because I've been overweight my whole life and it was a real struggle, even though you were being successful, you dropped out. So I can understand some of that. I don't have hardly any of those ACEs. Again, I was so fortunate in the way I was raised, and the stability of that, never having even to move, in my whole life, that kind of thing. And like I say, until I left for school, it just helps to put in perspective why we see what we see in some folks, and why we can even see it in the kids and the older kids.
Right.
The suicide piece is really scary to me, because we're seeing so much of that, well, in all walks of life right now.
Yep.
During this pandemic, but with our kids in care and the watchfulness that we always have to have. What a great background. Thank you so much. I'm excited to listen to what you have, the rest of what you have to say.
Yeah. And so, your question that you posed around, what does this kind of coronavirus intersection with these ACEs, what does that look like? What does that mean? It was a great question, and it really got me thinking quite a bit here. And I kind of went a few angles, right? I kind of reflected personally on what this time is doing, and then kind of scanned my immediate environment. What is this time doing to people? And ultimately, what it looks like, and then, I also kind of read some news and studies and so forth on what's going on. I am viewing this as just a grand accelerator of a lot of this, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily, the reality is, like, we're all going through it to some extent, right? I would say, personally, the experience is one of like the walls closing in a little bit, just because I don't get to do a lot of the stuff I've been able to do. And like, it's just, I can't go see my parents who recently moved. I can't, it's like all of these things that make it feel like kind of like the walls are closing in. But, the walls that are closing in are good, pretty decent walls, right? Like, I've got a wife, a family. My job at this point is secure or relatively secure, and we're not strapped, and all of these things. And so that's my experience. And so in many ways, what's been accelerated for me is my investment in my immediate family, right? And what I'm seeing, reading, and hearing is when the walls are closing in on a family that is in a much more dire or difficult or challenging situation, when those walls close in, things like physical abuse go from a level 2 to a level 6 experience, right? The emotional abuse, the stress, right? The economic turmoil that so many families, especially families who maybe are on the edge, are going through.
Well, those that are
Boy,
actually losing their place to live, the
I mean,
evictions and things. I mean, think what that
absolutely.
does.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, when I look at all the aces, right, I just think through, well, even like, you know, relationships and marriages maybe kind of disintegrating and falling apart through the stress. Like there wasn't a lot there, but they were hanging on, and then this pandemic hit, and it's like, you know what, it's just too much. And so that is literally one of the aces, right? And that's going to be the experience, and that would be, and then, domestic violence, and all of these things are just accelerated and exacerbated by the stress that people are under. And so I see that a lot. It's definitely been validated in a lot of the reading I've done over the past few weeks prepping for this discussion. Substance use is significantly up. I think, one of the spaces, or one of the challenges or kind of noteworthy pieces, especially early in the pandemic, and I'm sure you read and were quite concerned as I was about the challenge with safety checks, right? Like if there's a report of abuse, I mean, how the heck is a worker or someone who can go investigate that, how are they supposed to get out there safely? And so, there's a delay component to maybe getting some of these kids who needed to get out of a very unsafe situation. There's just to be real, a delay that occurred because of all this. And that's certainly going to be exacerbating of these ACEs and the kind of long-term impact of these ACEs. So yeah, again, we're all going through it. So I don't know if it'll be like we all get an extra check mark on the old ACE, or if you're a child, going through this. I do see it as it's very individualized, like the experience of what we're going through, from kids. But I think kids whose families were on the edge are really at risk of going over the edge during this time. And I think I personally am not seeing enough like political will and fire in the belly around some of these types of things. And so that's concerning. And I am concerned about what this will look like. I mean, you probably know too, like even kind of the economic cycles that we go through as a nation. In 08, the foster care rolls kind of like swelled post this kind of financial collapse, and then the kind of housing consequences and job consequences. And so more kids coming into care because, so I think that may serve as a template here for what we're going through. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. My oldest daughter was telling me about a friend of hers, and she said, and they're a functioning family. I mean, I guess both parents are probably in their mid 40s. I think 3 children at home. And so this woman was telling my daughter, she said, um, I've got to stop. And my daughter said, what do you mean? I've got to stop drinking so much wine. And so my daughter said, she asked her, well, what's going on? And she said, because my kids are asking me why I'm drinking so much wine. And I didn't even realize that I was drinking so much wine, And she said, so she was saying it's about the stress that I'm under, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to compensate, and I'm using wine. And she said, that's a bad example of my kids. My kids are worried about me, um, And she said, as she got to thinking about it, she's got to think about how many bottles of wine she bought in the last 3 months. And she said it gets more every week, you know.
Yeah.
And so we kind of creep into compensating in some way for the stress we're feeling, or the uncertainty we're feeling, or the worry that we're feeling, or, you know, the what if that we're feeling. Um, and, you know, that just got to be magnified for these kids who are maybe have a regularly scheduled visit with their dad who's in prison. Because I used to
Right.
have kids all the time. We'd have our regular Saturday time slot that was ours. Well, now they can't do it. I mean, even family time visitation isn't happening the way it ought to. We're enhancing the distress that the kids are and the parents are already feeling. Whoops, lost you. There you are. We're
In my back. Sorry.
yeah, you're good.
Hey.
So we're kind of getting that. I think you're right. I don't know if anybody's going to get another check mark on the ACEs or going to add number 11, you know, pandemic, but it's more about if they had some of these things already in the past, it just kind of magnifies maybe some of those feelings and that are still there about those situations. And
That's
so
right.
losing your place to live, you know, living in a car, some of those kinds of things, not knowing when you're going to eat next. The electricity's been turned off, but you still have a roof over your head. That's happening a lot um, due to the financial losses that people have, but also the mental health and emotional health issues that, I mean, we all have something, right? None of us have no worries, no problems, no anything.
Right.
And so they're being magnified, and those that again have more of those things, it's going to be probably a little more overwhelming for them. Um, so I don't know if there's an answer to any of this except to be cognizant of it and to be aware that if you're experiencing, you know, maybe issues with somebody or negative responses or lack of responses or whatever, it's not necessarily that they're intending to be unresponsive or negative, but it's happening because they're not functioning at the
That's right.
capacity that they were.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm seeing in my interactions with people, that it's just a different capacity level right now.
Yep.
Even though, like, for working folks are working, I know for me, it's like, I guess I'm working from home, but I did for the last 5 years, so that's not new. But I'm not getting as much work done. And I say that because now I'm on a virtual call anywhere from 4 to maybe 7 hours a day because everybody can have a meeting now, right?
Yep.
Problem is when at the end of that virtual call, I have had usually an assignment or two. Somebody wants something from me, either something I already have that I have to go find and get and send to them, or something I have to produce, right? Or some research I have to do before I can even produce that. And so it becomes, when do I have time to do that
Yep.
within the realm of a workday? How much do I do at night? How much do I do in the weekends? What does my family have to say about that? How does it affect them? Right?
That's right.
How is it affecting me? Is it like being on all the time because I can't get it all done because there are expectation now of participating in more things?
Right.
So how do we as parents, as foster parents, as working parents, how do we look at how this is affecting us, um, and then figure out what do we need to do in our own lives to manipulate that in some ways to make it better so we're healthier and more emotionally stable. Um, but then to, in retrospect, look at ourselves and understand those that we work with are in the same boat, and maybe they haven't
That's
gotten
right.
to the point where they've been able to figure it out yet about how to just say, you know what, I can't finish that on time because I
Right.
can't work more than 10 hours a day or whatever your limit
Yeah.
is.
I
Um,
think that's such an important observation, Irene. And I think, in many ways, like our lives kind of collectively were built around a kind of way of doing things, a kind of status quo. And the reality is like that has completely been upended. And yet for the past 6 months, what I see is kind of what you're seeing. We've kind of just tried to maintain the status quo in an environment that it no longer makes sense, right? And so I think the first step of anything is awareness, right? Like, holy cow, this isn't working, right?
like,
Like, wait a minute,
this
like,
can't be me,
this is not, yeah, that's right. This is not working.
not me.
Um, I think the second kind of like helpful kind of tip or thing that you got to go through is you got to realize like I shouldn't do, and I don't have to do anything that actually ends up killing me or sucking the life out of me, right? And so, again, we're not in the old world pre-COVID anymore. We're in this world, and we've got to like accept that. We got to accept reality on reality's terms, right? And say, you know what? Like, here's how I would. Here's what I would have to do in order to be like a fully functioning adult or person in this environment. And that honestly requires a lot of hard decisions and a lot of no's, and like, you know what, I can only do 3 hours of
Right,
Zoom a day. If
right.
you exceed 3 hours of Zoom, like if I do, I'm shot. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's not a thing. I've got to it's got I require a different model. But I look around at a lot of and I know every state's kind of doing it different. In where I'm at, school is at home for everybody, and it's like it's insane to kind of think through like these, especially parents who have been able to maintain employment, dual income, no childcare, their kids got science projects and math projects and all this stuff going on. It, but again, it's almost like we're trying to just keep it like it was. We're going to do everything we did
Mhm.
pre-COVID in this new dynamic. It just doesn't fit. And so it just
Right.
requires like an inventory and saying no to some things, and kind of resetting expectations in many ways, like
Mhm.
what's actually doable. And I also think when you were saying your quote earlier, I thought of a quote that I love. It's actually a song lyric by one of my favorite musicians named Tom Waits, and he has a great song. But in this song, he says, "If there's love in a house, it's a palace for sure," right? And so to kind of like reset your goal around here, right? Like, is your goal that your kids are on the honor roll? Is your goal that like they're in every activity? Is your goal, whatever achievement orientation or things that, the hamster wheel effect that we were living in
Right. For
prior?
sure.
Or what would it look like to just reset and be like, you know what? Like, I'm going to create love in this home, and that's my goal. And, and everything else can kind of stink for the time being. But
That's
if I'm
right.
hitting at that, like that's gonna hit a lot. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how I'm thinking
No,
through this
I
time.
agree with you. I mean, I just was saying to my husband the other day, I'm having to kind of what I call reprogram myself because I was raised that, you needed to be productive all the time.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
what we are when you're raised on a farm that produces everything, right? And you're
Right.
besides your living. And that it was God's intent that you make the best of every talent He gave you. All of those things that were a part of how I was raised. And so I've always had this work ethic that was probably even unrealistic because it was I said yes to everything. I would get it done. I didn't care if I didn't sleep for 3 days. I get something, to
Right.
somebody that when they needed it,
Right.
that kind of thing. And I know that in the last couple of months, the first couple of months, no, I was still trying to do that. But I have really learned to readjust myself, and I have been saying no, and I've been saying no to calls, um, and what I've found is a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, at least, when I've been approached to we need to have a virtual call. We need to this. And I've said, no, I'm sorry. It's my schedule is not available for that. And I've had other people then say to me, oh, thank you for saying that. I just didn't have the guts to do it yet. And I've
Yeah,
been saying, look, well-being for you as an individual is huge. It's so important. And I know the well-being, we hear it in foster care all the time. But when you look at what it really means, you cannot provide well-being to anybody in your family if you aren't well yourself.
that's right.
Can't do it. It's not there. You can't bring love and joy, right, into your family. And so that's kind of where I've been refocusing myself probably the last 6 weeks or so about how do I get back to even back to where I was, which was probably still too structured and too rigid. Um, but I'm kind of enjoying this new found freedom, so to speak, to say no more often and to push back deadlines when it's not realistic, and not to be feel bad about saying, I overcommitted myself. I didn't know all this others was going to come up, but I have to make priorities, and so we're just going to put this back a week or whatever it is, if that's what it is. I know I've gotten off of several boards that I've been serving on, that I've been
Yep.
on for years, and there are people like, "Why'd you get?" Well, I have to, time to redecide what life needs to look like. And when this is all the pandemic is done, and we get to some where we're going to be and how we're going to go forward, then maybe I can adjust some of that again and go back to some of it. But maybe I'm more healthy and my family's more healthy now and in the
Yep.
future than we were. So, and I mean, our kids are all grown, but our daughter still lives at home. Our youngest, she's 36 and she has Down syndrome. She depends on us.
Yep.
And I depend on her because she brings me joy every minute of every day. And I don't know what I'd do without that joyfulness in my life. Um, um, so I hope everybody finds that kind of joy through something or somebody. And and I also wanted to just point out what you said about mamas and daddies and the kids being homeschooled. I want to put a shout out to grandmas who are out there
Yes.
doing homeschooling with their grandkids,
Yes.
because mama and daddy are essential workers, and they can't be home to do this. I know so many grandmas who have stepped up and are now doing homeschooling, and kudos to them, or aunties or whoever they are, who have been able to say, you know what, I'll take this time in my life and devote it to my grandkids, because um, my kids can't, and it's that important. So there are so
Amazing.
many heroes going out there every day that we tend to not address. But it's important to remember that, again, like you said very eloquently, we're all in the same boat. We're all going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And if ever there was a time in this world for kindness, it's now. Um, so I think we've way overdone our time again, Jeff. I talk too much when you're on the show. I did that the first time,
Oh,
and I
you're
did it the
great.
second time. But you just kind of bring out the thoughts in me, and I appreciate that. Do you have any last thoughts to close out the show, or?
The one thing that came to mind just as a practical kind of tip and intervention for folks, it's a very basic one, but I think it's an important reminder. It comes from like Stoic philosophy, but it's a kind of intervention, right? Where you can catch yourself in your anxiety, because we're all kind of experiencing that anxiety. And the intervention is called like examining the evidence, right? You got to examine the evidence of that anxiety, and you've got to take a hard look at, am I having like anxious thoughts, feelings, fears about something that I can control, or is this something outside of my control? And then allow yourself to release those things that you do not have any control over.
Right.
And Lord knows you got plenty of things that you do control that are a hot mess too. So you got to like leave
Absolutely.
some bandwidth there. So yeah, I just want to encourage people to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
Well, that's the perfect way to end it, because that's incredibly real. Sometimes we lay awake at night and can't sleep, and we're worrying about something we can't do anything about anyway.
right,
No matter if we were up and working on it, we couldn't do it because it's not in our realm. But we lay there and
right,
worry about it, right? So
right.
great words to help relieve some of that stress and anxiety for people that we're experiencing. And thank you. Again, it's so nice to have you on. It's terrific to work with you. I loved my time as a consultant, and it enabled me to meet you and
Yeah,
spend some time in Georgia. So I hope we can continue our relationship, and maybe we'll actually come up with another topic for you in the future if you
love it.
don't mind.
Hey, I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It was a real
Okay.
honor, Irene. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, I don't know if we have a cartoon or not to end there. We do. I forgot to ask prior to making sure we had it. So again, there's a cartoon here. It's about people working from home, and so what type of office do you have at home? A bed office, a couch office, the kitchen table office, or your closet office? And of course, the lady saying, "Hi everyone, my kids might barge in at any moment." I've had some of the funnest virtual calls over the last several months with kids popping in and saying the darndest things, And so I always think about that Art Linkletter show from many, many years ago. Kids say the darndest things. And we've had some real good laughs on some of our business calls because of what the kids sneak in and either do behind the parent or say out loud or whatever. So, again, if those things happen, they happen. It's not the end of the world. The meeting's not ruined. Enjoy your kids, look for the fun stuff that they're doing, and your week will go better and your day will go better if you can find those funny things that are happening and that they're not all bad. And then just one very last final thing is, please stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at United Healthcare. For more information about United Healthcare, please visit www.uhc.com.